Let me say just a few words introducing the topic tonight. This is about drugs, drug addiction, drug policy, penal reform, the politics of all this. It's about policy, which is what we spend a lot of time writing about and thinking about here in democracy, but it's also a personal story. And I think that any of you who've been following the serial publication of Charles's book, Exile Nation, will know that it's a very personal story in Charles's case. What I'm really looking forward to hearing about this evening is not only all of that, not only all of the analysis, but also some thoughts about what our attitude towards drugs and drug policy should be, what the ideals should be. It strikes me that when Marx said that religion was the opiate of people, he wasn't being kind to religion. And it's, there's quite, I think that a lot of us in this audience are going to be extremely liberal when it comes to thinking about drugs, but that's not all of what our thinking about drugs ought to be. So I look forward to hearing about that. And also I look forward to hearing about not only how things should be, but also how one can get there. It's one of these remarkable areas that, in a sense, there's a huge amount of consensus that we're doing things wrong, and yet things keep not changing. And so I'll also be interested in hearing and learning why that is and what one can actually do. So with that, let me hand over to Charles. Charles, thank you very much.
Do you mind if I stand up? I do better when I stand up. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm really, really honored to be here and to speak to all of you. The United Kingdom, as strange as this may sound to you, is light years ahead of the United States in a lot of these social issues, and this is one of them. I have been very blessed and very fortunate to work with these folks and to have them recognize the type of work that I was doing and to give me the chance to really tell my story and to tell other people's stories. And I wouldn't even know where to begin to start describing what I have experienced over the last 2 months. I've traveled every square corner of the continental United States. I have been in 30 cities. I have interviewed almost 60 people. And it has been a life-changing experience. Every one of these people has been caught up in the criminal justice system of America in one way or the other, and I would argue that probably about 90% of them were caught up in the war on drugs. And you'll get to meet some of them and see some raw interview clips, and I hope that Roger will please excuse my amateurness in this regard, since this is a very esteemed filmmaker, and so I'm a little bit nervous about showing some raw clips. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background just on who I am and what my story is and my whole reason for doing this. I spent the better part of about 10 years with a very brutal addiction to crack cocaine. I, of course, would take anything that you put in front of me, but I was really very much a stimulant and amphetamine and cocaine addict. The reasons that I got into this were the standard type of reasons that people tend to find themselves in this situation. I came from a very violent and abusive background, and I had suffered a lot of abuse and violence and rape and sexual assault and a lot of well, I guess just straight out torture, I guess is the easiest way to put it. By the time I was, only about 18 years old. There are reasons for this. There's familial reasons. I come from a long line of crazy Sicilians, and they tend to be a little bit violent and explosive in their natures. I also had the misfortune of being around a sexual predator as a child. I was also sent to a military academy when I was 14 and suffered a kind of ritualized abuse and hazing. The second year of which I was systematically raped repeatedly for about a year. When I got away from my home and my family, went to college. I went to Boston University in the late 80s. And I went to school. I did very well in school, but I also got very, very deeply into drugs. And it was many years later that I came to understand that this was all self-medication. This is a way for me to kind of deal with the pain and the discomfort that I felt in trying to exist in day-to-day life. But because of this addiction and because of the carelessness that comes along with this type of behavior, I found myself in a series of situations where things only got worse. And I go into a great deal of detail about this in my book, and I don't want to sit and take up a lot of time just kind of going through war stories. But the net result of it is that this, formative period threw me into a 10-year period where I was struggling to kick this crack addiction. It was a very difficult thing. It was harder than anything I had ever dealt with in my life. And it took me about 10 years to recover from this. Along the way, while I was dealing with the addiction, I ran afoul of the law, as they say. A couple of times I got a couple of felony convictions in the state of Illinois. I born and raised and spent most of my time in Chicago. So we're talking about a very big city with a very big drug economy and a very big criminal underground and a very dangerous gang culture and street drug culture. And that was where I kind of cut my teeth as an addict. When 9/11 happened, I had a kind of a paradigm shift. I had a very bad day that day. And I'm sure most people can kind of say that, but for me it wasn't bad because, yes, I was kind of connecting on some level to the collective tragedy that we were going through and the collective trauma. But I also had been pretty much an outcast too. I'd been living on the fringes of society, just trying to survive. But what 9/11 did was shatter any of these myths that I held about what my country was and what my society was. And there was this overwhelming, I don't want to say a voice, but it was a conscious awareness that came into my mind that said, this new world will not have patience for you. And you have got to get it together or they're going to come for you eventually. And it was a very powerful motivating factor. And so I decided to clean my act up. And I was really tired at that point. I was 31 years old. I needed a change. I needed to get out of this. There's so much I wanted to do with my life. And so I started on this very long road to recovery. And it took about 10 years, and it was divided into two halves. And the first half of this recovery, I took all of this cocaine energy and I started to fight for what I thought was justice. And I very, very quickly burnt out and realized that what I was really fighting was something inside of me. And I was externalizing my own inner struggle by trying to rail in the streets against the system. So after about 4 years of this, and this period of disillusionment where I lost faith in everything, and including the movements that held me together the last 4 years, I also ran into a situation where my activist work got me into a lot of trouble with the Chicago police. I was beat up by them one night pretty badly. I was falsely imprisoned. They put some charges on me. And I needed to get out of that city for a while. I went to the West Coast. And, here we are in England, the birth of rave culture, and an entirely new paradigm in understanding counterculture. And when that translated over to the States, I missed all of that. I never got to participate in any of it because I was in a very different part of the city doing very different things. So I didn't understand the psychedelic underground or any of this community that existed. But I ran into it in San Francisco in the middle part of this last decade.